Chad Jenkins is a lifelong entrepreneur and visionary known for reshaping businesses to deliver remarkable returns. With 3 groundbreaking methods and boundless curiosity, he serves as a catalyst for business growth. Collaborating with leaders across industries, he uncovers hidden opportunities, achieving exponential enterprise value growth. Chad's track record includes 40 plus high growth companies and numerous successful growth partnerships. Now he empowers others through growth collaboration partnerships and the SeedSpark Growth Academy. His new book, Just Add a Zero, is a guide to outperforming competitors and achieving exponential growth through collaboration. Chad, welcome to the next level.
Ryan, so good to see you. And Steven, same. I'm excited to be here.
Super excited. So my mind immediately, when you say just add a zero, goes to sort of the 10x thinking that I think is really, sort of a popular mental model for entrepreneurs today, right? There's a lot of 10x talk out there. There are programs for entrepreneurs like the 10x program from Strategic Coach. But just add a zero suggests that we should be thinking about something more like 100x. So tell us a little bit, if you would, about the philosophy behind just add a zero. And I want to dig into more of what a 10x or 100x collaboration looks like, but would love to start there.
Yeah, sure. So just add a zero actually takes me back all the way to, I was around 8 years old, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was absolutely a catalyst to changing the way that you see the world and also the way that you think about value creation. So the just add a zero, as I mentioned, I applied it when I figured out within a rough order of magnitude what my father made annually. And I would say as we were all young boys at that time, somewhere through your grade school, it was a competition, right? So it's fresh on the brain. And who knows if I even was remotely close, I probably guessed this number, but I tend to do math pretty quickly, like simple math really, really fast. And I broke it down to the hour and also down to the minute. And I was like, oh, that's not that big of a number. Of course it's not. And now I know that I'm a 3-1 print. So to succeed and achieve, and for everything to be correct, right, and perfect. So the succeed and achieve definitely showed up, and I added a zero to the number. Then when I extrapolated that back out to the annual amount, that's a little bit of a different number. And at that time, I will joke that fear and greed struck me at the exact same time. And it made me begin to look at the world not as the labels that were given for things, but actually what value I could create by the combination of them. So you mentioned collaboration earlier in the bio and just the introduction. I've been training my brain for collaboration since I was around 8. That's the earliest that I can track it backwards. And that just add a zero, it's always been a catalyst just to empower people to leverage all the gray matter and all the experience that they have versus just, there's a book that is called The Clear Thinking by Shane Parrish, and it talks about 4 biological responses. So the inertia default, or the ego default, or even the emotional or the social default. So I recognize in leadership teams, because I use this just add a zero, I didn't just write a book about it, it's actually practical application, which I structure my whole thinking around. I love these concepts. You mentioned 10x earlier. Anywhere, anytime I can find a concept, my brain goes into the immediate action of making it practically applicable. So I'll massage the words a little bit, or I'll come up with a different way to apply it, and it makes it very reachable. So just add a zero, making it very reachable, I've used in many different leadership meetings to actually combat the inertia default. So we've all been in leadership meetings, being entrepreneurs, and if the ones that are running EOS, there's things on the IDS section when you get to that place of your meeting or that time of your meeting. And the first one that maybe you vote in prioritization, maybe you don't, maybe you just take a round robin, but you pick out that one and somebody in the group comes up with a solve. What does the next person do? It's a little bit better solve. So the just add a zero thinking, and I've used this many times. There was one, this is probably 2015, this was an organization that I sold long ago. There were 10 folks in the particular sales division. 6 of them were crushing it. 4 of them were not at all. They were really good folks. They had great relationships. They just weren't converting. So what do we think that the solve is? Without me saying anything more, when it popped up on the IDS section, let's do something with the 4. Let's support the 6. How are we going to hit our numbers if we cut 40% of the staff? Like these are all very logical things. So in that particular meeting, I said, what if how are we going to hit our numbers if we just drop down to 1 and just be really, really quiet, right? So instead of adding the 0 to the end, which from a logic perspective, everyone wants to add a 0 to their revenue most oftentimes, but I would argue net profit is a lot more fun, to be honest with you. But adding that 0 to the front, that really made them think. And then I do look for things that embraced what the brain does naturally. So the first thing when I added that 0 to the front and said, hey, how are we going to hit our numbers? There's a lot of brain power around the table. How are we going to hit our numbers if we add that 0 to the front? Just take it down to 1. The very first thing that happens, and be close to a whiteboard, everyone around the table is going to tell you why that can never be true. And that's fun and exciting, sure, and embrace it. Like actually try to draw that out from them. Why? Because it's what their brain does naturally. Get it all out on the table. And then you might also consider walking right back to that whiteboard. And after all those bullet points of them telling you why that could never be true, write down the power of one little word: unless, 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 unless. And then this is the second portion that's really, really hard for a 3-1 print or from a big, high, quick start. You have to be patient. Now you'll find out why you have all those folks on your leadership team. Because if you can keep your mouth shut, which is very hard to do, as I mentioned, from personal experience, what comes out after somebody breaks silence is a roadmap that you write down on the right side that's going to get you close to, maybe not exact, hitting your numbers in this scenario, hitting your numbers with a tenth of the sales team in that example. And I'm not saying that you do exactly what comes out. I'm saying what does come out is somewhat revolutionary to what is absolutely the convention. When you put that on IDS, somebody's going to come up with a solve, and the next guy's going to come up with a better solve. By the time you get around the table, you're going to have a pretty good solve, but it's going to be the same thing. We're not asking the right question. So when I mentioned it's a catalyst, when you add that 0, whether it be to the end or to the beginning of a number, you embrace the capabilities of your brain and the entire wisdom of that leadership team with asking the right question and coming up with a much better, sometimes not even foreseen, not even thought about until you add that 0. Would you ever be in the realm of this type of solution making?
That's super fascinating. And I want to talk about the collaborations and what's unleashed. And I want to talk about all the entrepreneurial, partnerships and opportunities that come. But I really want to focus in a little bit on what you just shared there with the team perspective. So I get that, you can take a number, let's say your revenue or your profit, and you can add the 0. And now, like, how do we get there? But it was a really interesting example you used where you're talking about how do we effectively do a lot more with less. Having done this for so long and had this just add a 0 sort of framework or mindset, do you find that is inculcated in the teams that you're working with? Like, do they begin to embrace and run with it and themselves start to see things that way? Or do you find that that's always the type of questioning, the line of thought that's reserved for the leader at the front of the room because that inertial force is just too much to overcome otherwise?
I think over time you will see migration to this mindset, to this concept, but it does take support. So you're mentioning earlier, is it always instructor led, basically the entrepreneur, whoever the leader is at the front of the room? It definitely always starts there. But I'll tell you, this particular book that you mentioned, recently it's gotten even a ton more traction than when I very first released it, and has reached a couple bestsellers. I'm getting notes back from people up and down the food chain, not just entrepreneurs, of where they're implementing this type of thinking or this catalyst type of thinking, even in their personal life. Because how big could we actually make this, or how could we accomplish this with a fraction of the resources that we're putting in? And in every instance, something bigger and better comes out of it than just the regular conventional thinking. That's a great question.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I want to dig more into what that thinking looks like when applied to your personal life as well, because I think that's we're really good at talking about, everything in the business context, but we sometimes we overlook the learnings and the applicability to the personal context as well. So connect the dots for me a little bit then. You've been thinking about collaboration since you were 8 years old.
Yes.
You've got me beat by a long shot on experience there. So what do good collaborations begin to look like, and connect that to um, the just add a zero mindset? Like how do, if I want to just add a zero, how do I begin to think about collaborations as a way to enable or operationalize that thinking?
Yeah, so we'll start with the just add a zero. So adding it to the front or to the back and utilizing as a catalyst to think bigger. You will often hear me say, obstacle is the way, which is, of course, another wonderful book, Ryan Holiday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And I always add to the end of it, and collaboration is the way through it. I've not yet met anybody or anything that hasn't shown me an obstacle that it didn't take collaboration to get through it, whether it be a person, a place, or a thing. So, first, defining collaboration as I do, which is the unique value that is created from the combining of two or more people, places, and things. So, with that fundamental understanding of the definition, and then look back in your past, and close your eyes and imagine, and think of any obstacle in your past that you had run across. It could have been an impediment to your growth journey. It could have been something personally that you wanted, and you had to collaborate with either time or place or people or things to create that. So, collaboration is, for me, everything. Now, the obstacle is the way. How do you identify the obstacles? And I gave that scenario earlier. How are we going to hit our goals if we drop down to one sales team member? That created a lot of obstacles. They literally told me all of them. It was very easy for them to come up with them. But they wouldn't have come up with the level of them or that depth of them if I wouldn't have used just add a zero as a catalyst to really unlock the capabilities of them, of everyone around the table, I should say.
So if we're thinking about collaborations, and I love that way of thinking about it, right? The obstacle is the way and collaboration is the way through. What characterizes, because you've done this so many times, you've seen what works, I'm sure you've got your fair share of stories about things that don't work as well. What are some of the things you've learned that characterize a really great collaboration? What are the signals that maybe you're on the verge of a great collaborations? What conversations need to be had up front to set up a great collaboration? Just on the front end, what does that look like?
Yes, I'll tell you one key item, and we'll give definitely proper kudos to Dan Sullivan's rules for collaboration. Alignment with the same hero target. So when I say hero target, I'm sure we all know, and most listeners do, who do you want your business to be a hero to? So fundamental, we want to serve the same hero target. That is a big time catalyst. Now I'll move over into the way that I define it and leverage them at a pretty aggressive clip. I prefer to split the outcome. We are both aligned, not only at the beginning, where the old conventional way to do it is for you to give me a quote. But if this is a true collaboration and we're serving the same hero target, I would like to participate well beyond the conventions of margins in my industry. And the other person would as well. Therefore, we split the outcome. Another fundamental rule, the second success becomes and begins to unveil itself, we split that cash. So in any of my collaborations, I have ACH set up where the second that whatever we deem, and being transparent on the front, that we'll know it's working when this happens. Well, when this happens and it turns into some type of monetary amount, we split the outcome immediately, and it's all ACH transactions. So no one is looking for the reconciliation of what happened this week. The cash is already in their account, and then after that, the reconciliation comes. So you're truly aligned. What you will find in doing that is, and I mentioned splitting the outcome, if you focus on that being a prereq for your collaborations, you get the absolute best out of people. But verse it against the convention. I would like something done at my home, or I'd like something done in my business, or I'd like to engage this marketing firm. And they produced the old school, the old convention, a very nice proposal. On page 3 at the bottom right, after I read through a plethora of bullet points, and a bunch of lingo that I'm not in their industry, so I don't really exactly know what these words mean. But boy, they put on a nice presentation. Did you see that PowerPoint, by the way? It was very nice and well put together. And it's 50 grand at the bottom right. We'll take the marketing one. It's going to take about 3 months before it really starts to work. 3 months come and go. It's not working. And then let's say you decide to end that relationship around month 6. Now consider option number 2, where we align on the outcome. And we split success the second it begins to happen. The old conventional way, all those bullet points, I could hold them to those bullet points provided I can understand exactly what this means. But the challenge with that is once I signed the proposal and transferred the funds, inevitably their business changed. The market changed. Guess whose else's business changed? Mine. And I needed that real heavy wisdom, expertise in their industry to collaborate with mine to create the best possible outcome. Now, if the outcome is better than the amount of leads that they were going to produce over the first period, wouldn't I have been a whole lot happier to split the outcome with them, pay them more? Because the alternative, the convention, and if we had an audience here on this particular show, I feel like I could ask one question about the marketing example, and more than 80% of the room would lift their right hand and say, yes, me too. We've all done this, right? So just in that one particular example, you can see how splitting the outcome, everybody makes more money. It's not to the conventions of whatever the industry margins are. And you get the best possible team members to help produce that outcome because you're all aligned in what success actually means. Knowing that success and the path to get there is going to be a little bit different than what was in that beautiful PowerPoint or that very nicely put together proposal.
I think that's I can hear the hands going up. I know that's certainly been my personal experience working with marketing agencies. I owned a marketing agency for a decade. I've certainly been on both sides of that conversation and very much felt that. I think that example drives home both the potential of what great collaborations look like, but also kind of helps sort of sharpen the perception of what's possible. Can you just give maybe one other example that comes to mind of a great collaboration and maybe a challenging collaboration, maybe one where you didn't see the immediate possibility, but after digging in and thinking about it, you found the alignment, you found the opportunity for success? Because I think that's just going to really bring it home for listeners. It certainly did for me.
I'll give you, they're everywhere. The opportunity is everywhere. A recent conversation, this was earlier today. It's a tax controversy attorney. So tax attorney. And he was introduced to me maybe a year ago. He has now left the very large firm that he was with, and he's out on his own. He was contacted by another person, two people. One is actually a family member in upstate New York, kind of strange, who's in the same industry, even more strange. And he also has gone out on his own. A gentleman here in the local city, he was contacted through his networking events, and the gentleman said, I really want to grow my practice. I've been doing it for about a year. I'd love to hire you to work part-time. Now, this particular gentleman is asking me, he's like, would you even consider that? And I said, absolutely, I consider it. And then you just ask him a couple other qualifying questions, because in immediate, I was able to, of course, be aware. And all of this is driven out of awareness of value creation. I'll continue to say that because it rings true. Let me understand the facts. This gentleman does the same thing that you do within reason. Obviously, doesn't do it the same way that you do, but you're serving the same hero target. The answer is yes. And then he'd like to engage with you because he's trying to grow his business for overflow, right? He's not big enough to hire someone, nor are you just started, nor is the gentleman upstate New York. But again, you guys could serve each other. Is that a true statement? The answer is yes. I'm absolutely going to take that deal. I'm going to split the outcome, and I'm going to tie all them together. I may never, ever actually do any of that tax controversy work because I've got somebody who I can leverage upstate New York, and I can clip a coupon on whatever that revenue is, right? Because remember, I'm not trading time for money anymore, right? For the entrepreneurs that are listening, the quicker that we stop doing that, the faster we actually become a real entrepreneur. We don't trade time for money. So in this particular example, initially, he would have looked at doing it that way, trading time for money. But if he considers splitting the outcome and he also considers what other resources are at his fingertips, somebody who knows him, likes him, and trusts him up in upstate New York that does the same thing, he now has a potential business forming in collaboration between all two, I should say all three, including him. And I would expect there are more out there. So a couple other questions. I found out that most of those guys are single operators, maybe one or two, or they're the very large legal firms that have it as a practice, a piece of their practice. So just approaching it from very open-mindedness and understanding how you can create more value for the hero target. And then there he identified multiple hero targets. He's able to put together a collaboration that not only is now he able to grow his business faster, but he can sell a subscription to this community that he's creating to handle small guys' overflow. And based upon it being a subscription, now he's created a lot more enterprise value than the original trade time for money in a very expensive legal hour transfer value. Obviously, he'd make a decent amount of money. He had nothing to sell. By the end of the conversation, this gentleman now, we gave it a name because you've heard me say this before probably. If you have a baby and I have one and we don't name it, whose is it? I'm not sure. Your guys would probably have more hair than mine would. So we don't do this at home ever. Why do we do it in business every day? So by the time the lunch was over, he'd already named it. He'd reached out to both of them. He'd also reached out to two older gentlemen that are in town that have nothing to sell, but because he has a mechanism of additional resources, additional capacity, he can actually become their retirement plan. There's no doubt this guy's going to grow exponentially over the 12 months. There's no doubt. He's just thinking about it the right way. So that's just another example of a collaboration that can be created by just identifying the friction that other people have and then combining resources to create more value. Just going back to the original definition.
So, Chad, I love the examples given, and you said share the success, right? Not just
Yes.
the beginning, but the success. A couple of things that I've seen, and maybe they weren't collaborations from your view, so I'd love to get your insight on this.
Sure.
I've seen this model applied without maybe the language or structure that you thought you put into it. Where I've seen sometimes it go wrong. I don't know the right language for it, but basically, you have success. Ultimately, the success grows. There's revenue being shared, but the business is both growing. They're both growing their businesses still independently. And then they get to the point where they say, well, I could do this same business, direct revenue with my expanded team. And, we could keep all the revenue instead of setting that out. So I'm curious, that's the first one. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And then I have another one that I've seen that I would just love to hear your insights and wisdom on.
You're 100% right. You can have that type of mindset shift, right? In the theory, whenever you create these collaborations, and it sounds like this one may have started that particular way, you're really, really excellent at what you do. I'm very confident in being able to create the outcome of adding my resources and your resources and creating this new something, right? Later on in the game, one of us decides to expand our businesses and begin to do what the other does. It's a hard pass. Right? Exit that thing immediately, because what you've now witnessed is a shift in the mindset. And that other firm, I've seen this happen 2 or 3 times. They do not grow. The hero target ends up looking for someone else to do it because the quality and service goes down. It's inevitable. It has happened so many times in the past. Begin to look for, because now you have a verified model that has produced income and produced competitive advantages for both you and your original collaboration partner. I've seen it be very easy to find somebody else to step in those shoes that has that same type of mindset. Yeah.
So your sense is understand that could be a potential pitfall, but
yes.
to just address it on the front end, which takes me to the second one where I've seen and actually was on the wrong side of experiencing this with a prior business where we created a tremendous amount of value. We helped grow a company, and they had no sales team. We were their outsourced sales force, and so we grew equity in their business up to a certain amount based on how much business we produced for them. And they transitioned some of the ownership, and they tried to squeeze us out of and like it was a whole deal, attorneys involved, freezing a bank
Oh
account,
yes.
stuff like that. And
Oh man.
so I just I'm curious to like I have my set of experiences there, but I've seen this happen in other situations. So I'm just kind of, sharing the outcome can mean
Hmm.
sharing equity too. And so I'm just curious, like what wisdom you have there as well, because I know you've done a
Yeah.
lot of this.
Yeah. So I'll touch on the first example that we gave earlier, the first question that you had,
Hmm.
where and I'll just take hypotheticals, of course, but
Sure.
your services and my services. You remember, we'll go back to the original definition that I have of collaboration. It is the unique value created from the combination of two or more people, places, and things. So that means you really can't create that value without me, nor can I. It took you plus me, and we created this new thing.
Hmm.
And in theory, if you follow my methodology, we're going to name the baby that we just created. And from an intellectual property ownership, the way that I do it is I put it in a separate LLC that
Hmm.
we own 50/50. And that also will keep everybody honest as you go about. Because if they began to do it, I still own 50% of the intellectual property, and we have now been charging both of our P&Ls for the opportunity to license this methodology that we created this baby from, right? Therefore, if either one of us go to sell, we're not just going to get one check, we're going to get two, because we also own the intellectual property rights to this other LLC that provides us the ability to create this value together, not to get super complicated.
Yeah.
But now let's move to the next one. So I'll tell you, when I've created SeedSpark Growth Partners, I have 4 different types of collaboration that, depending on the time, we could get into, or maybe in a different podcast. But the
It's hitting high
third type
level.
of
Yeah.
collaboration is a joint venture collaboration. The one that we just talked about, where we come together and combine together and we create something new, which to me, that is absolutely a growth collaboration. That is the pinnacle. That's what you're always trying to get to. Because here we created something new that doesn't exist in the marketplace. We've effectively wiped out the competition in whole. If you have, again, followed my methodology and you name it, over time, you evolve industries. Because people don't want to buy 2 or 3 different things and sign 2 or 3 different contracts. They want to go to the one that they can get the outcome collectively. So that's where you try to get to. But otherwise, a joint venture collaboration is also an absolute game changer. And that's what it sounded like there. Your skill set plus their opportunity and their vision created a lot of enterprise value and a lot of profitability along the way. So it's modeled exactly as the outcome that I create with others under my joint venture collaborations, which effectively is SeedSpark Growth Partners. And what that means is I meet entrepreneurs where they are, and I begin to collaborate with them on something bigger and better, which is ultimately growth. I partner on the outcome, and the outcome is metered or managed or interpreted 2 different ways. The first one is my growth partners set the multiples in their industry. Now, if they say 10, and we know, just also on an M&A firm, that the multiples in the industry are 6, I'm going to politely give that to them for consideration. Now, if I split the outcome and we make one more dollar of profit, and that dollar of profit is multiplied times 10, it's better for me than it is multiplied times 6. And I'll also share that with them. But some people have a little bit differing views, whether depending on which side you are and what their valuations are.
Oh
But I
yeah.
try to be very transparent. Okay. So we let them set EBITDA is EBITDA. Like, that's pretty easy to get to.
Yep.
In all of my engagements, I plus them always are the buyer. So either one of us can pull the ripcord at any time. And we do, when we do, EBITDA at that moment times the multiples that we both agreed upon that they set equals the calculation that I get paid out for my 10% of increase. So whatever they came to the party with is 100% always theirs, and it will be, both in profit and also enterprise value. But I built in a mechanism that gives them a ripcord and me a ripcord, that at any moment we could pull it. And when we do, current EBITDA times the multiples equals the sum of money less the original delta, and that percentage of increase times 0.10. In all my growth collaborations, we split the outcome 90-10. 90 to the entrepreneur who owns the business, who will always own all of the business, and 10% of the appreciation. That's a way that I've solved for it, because I've seen that happen before. And you absolutely, you could still go through those mechanisms or those gyrations. And I'm so sorry you had to do that. I've had a couple similar type things way before I created SeedSpark Growth Partners in the past. Some things are somewhat unavoidable. If you can see them coming, perhaps you had that ripcord, you might have pulled it really quickly. You know,
Well, it was
and I'll give you another example. In my agreements, anytime there's a liquidity change or ownership change, it causes that. Now I reserve the right to stay in the game, but by default, we've already triggered the mechanism. Yeah. It just seems to
got
be
it.
fair with both parties. Now, if they would like to engage after the new ownership takes over, we understand what the EBIT is. We just exited. That sets the new baseline. That's 100% theirs. And from there on, they can grow as growth partners with my entire global community, and we'll split the outcome. Yeah.
Well, it was great tuition.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And you know, we definitely learned a lot. And what I think is, you know, when I walked away from it, so I love that you're putting frameworks around this. You're putting this thinking, you know, in place and naming things, and just being so thoughtful about it, because, you know, we were collaborating, but we didn't know what we were doing. We just saw a way to create value together, right? And it was great until it wasn't, right? And then ultimately, you know, they ended up finding out that they had to pay us, and there's some other things like that. So it was a big waste of money, but it was really stressful. And you're dead on what you said earlier in the show, which is they stopped growing because we no longer trusted them to continue to put business in, and they started running the business very differently. And we had other sources. We were a sales engineer for multiple companies like theirs, so we had other companies we would just place the business with because they had now breached all that bank reserve of trust. You know.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But I learned
Trust
the wrong
being
lesson.
so important.
Yeah, and I learned the wrong lesson.
ACH. So sorry.
Yeah. No. Go ahead. You please.
Earlier in the conversation, I mentioned one of my fundamental requirements is we split every dollar that comes in the organization as fast as we possibly can. Now, if you're splitting $1 and you're going to give away 12 cents, I don't know if you want to do that 19 times a day, but so weekly might be okay. But what I'm saying is, when you have people put this level of trust in you, where they're putting their heart and soul into creating this big outcome, and as I mentioned, you are wiping the competition off the playing field. Like, they're gone. They don't have the same messaging. They can't create the same value. And you're all partnering on the outcome, which means you're going to make a lot more money than you would under the conventions of your industry. That's a game changer. Pre-reg is we split money really quickly. I don't want anybody ever waiting on me thinking, well, how much did we do this week? But by doing that, what you do, and you talked about bank of trust, when those checks start rolling in and they're getting double or triple the margin over the conventional way that they used to create their proposal, that's inspiring to them. It builds definitely a foundation of trust. And these are very, very long lasting relationships that you can count on. It wasn't mentioned earlier, but sometimes these things get a little bit, they get fray on the ends. Because if you go back to that old convention where they had all those bullet points on the proposal, and really that was a little optimistic. I will say that, aggressively optimistic. But the 6 in the middle, they were really good at doing. When you split the outcome, it's really quickly, you will find that you don't have to fire anybody. And those 3 bullet points that are above and the 3 that were below, different than the 6 in the middle, they will ask you proactively to trim that back. They are no longer confident in their ability to create that outcome. But then you know exactly what I classify as your unique value contribution. So for those of us in strategic coach, I would say unique ability is absolute requirement. And so start that journey today. The practical application of your unique ability, I've coined unique value contribution. When you enter into these collaborations where you split the outcome, you find out really quickly, and I'll use the analogy again of all those bullet points, the 6 in the middle, that they truly sometimes are the best on the planet at doing. Now you've got a relationship you can really count on. And boy, the creativity that can come out of that. So I've been focusing a lot on, not to jump, but third mind innovation is what I call it, TMI. And doing research on it, and just recognizing that these collaborations are going really well, and the creativity is what I haven't really noticed before, certainly in a vendor, service provider, client relationship. And I did some research on it and found out that Firestone, Ford, and Carnegie would actually get together quite frequently And they felt like whenever they would really start talking, they would then create this third mind that would tap into the creativity and wisdom that's actually in the universe. And I can see that in these collaborations. When you dial in and you really understand somebody, including your own, when you're able to embrace your unique value contribution and combine it with somebody else's, you definitely see a lot of creativity and just wisdom that you can't go read in a book, but it just kind of comes to you. And boy, the relationships can create a ton of value for a very long time. So it's really surprising to me that others don't even consider this.
I feel like it's fascinating. I feel like you've sort of whet the appetite here, talking about the just add a zero and the collaborations and what's possible as sort of third mind, right? And you mentioned SeedSpark throughout there a little bit. I think folks would really love to kind of hear just like an elevator pitch of how what is SeedSpark? Because to me, it's my expectation would be it is a reflection, it is the operationalization of all of these principles and ideas you've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So bring it down to ground level for us. So how do you make it happen in your business?
Sure. So today, I'm very fortunate. I still own 15 to 17 operating companies that are in wildly different industries. But I mentioned unique ability earlier and then evolving it to be unique value contribution. So I started my journey maybe 4 years ago. I understand what it is. And I had been chastised for having all these different companies along the way. It's like, how much is too much? And what I figured out was the reason I'd had so many is because I was always doing what my unique value contribution was. So what I did is just evolve that to be the business that I'm in, which is the ability to find unique ways to grow completely independent of whatever the convention is. And because I've had so many organizations and had to figure out what ERP are we going to use, what days or holidays are we going to take off, what's our mission, passion, and vision. And all these things I've done a lot of times, but it's not my highest and most way that I create value. I wanted to stop doing that. I figured out that if I do have the ability to figure out how to create value uniquely through someone's existing resources and through the art of collaboration, why don't I just make that the business and split the outcome? So that's what evolved. So SeedSpark, the name stands for seed the vision, spark growth. And it has always been that way. Originally starting out, I used that corporate name to create apps that automated business processes 2 years before the iPhone was released, then a cybersecurity firm, then a digital marketing firm. And for me, it makes no sense for all those to be combined, but that's not true. For me, I saw it differently. I could use the IT to give you solid foundation and security, something you could build upon. I could use the application development to enable you to scale. Then now that you have a solid foundation and you're ready to scale, what do? You need to pour more gas through the engine. That was the digital marketing. But without that awareness at the very top to combine all those, which I only got paid for once, right? You would either build a website, you would do a digital marketing campaign, you would build an app to revolutionize the operational procedures of an organization, or you'd manage their cybersecurity and manage their IT. You didn't get paid for the value creation and the enterprise value, to your point earlier, Stephen, that I was creating for these organizations. So I just lifted SeedSpark's name, rebranded a bunch of my other organizations, and I go to market now partnering on the outcome with entrepreneurs all over the world. So I look for growth-minded entrepreneurs that are kind of ready to divorce the convention and partner on the outcome. And I have a growth guarantee. So for any reason, if they're not growing, which could be both sides, right? Maybe my concepts don't really work. There's a lot of experience in that sometimes they work. Or for whatever reason, their life has changed, their business has changed. And if that is true, we will delightfully give them their subscription money back, and we'll keep them as friends and figure out how to help them grow their business alternatively just outside of our growth partner model.
Amazing. I just have one last personal question. I think entrepreneurship, it's a move fast and break things, very popular sort of way to think about it. And you mentioned at the top your print is that you seek perfectionism, or you have some perfectionist tendencies.
Yes.
How do those square? You're looking at collaborations with a lot of flawed business partners, no doubt, and I'm sure you can enumerate the flaws that you have as well, and you're working on. So I suffer a little bit with a perfectionist mindset. Help free me from that. What have you done to either be supercharged by it, which is okay, I'd love to hear that, or how you've been able to put that in the back seat when necessary?
So 80% is my immediate knee-jerk response to the question. I have to be okay with 80% first pass. 2 passes equal 96. I'm good with 96. Embracing the perfectionist for me, and that it's funny, I signed books. I have a new book coming out in just about a month or two. But in the first book, I had signed every one of them, not really thinking about it, just came natural. Better is infinite. Stay curious. So the perfectionist piece and embracing it, really embracing it, I see everything 10 times better. We'll just use some 10x talk there, 10 times better. And that's okay. I will share that. And if somebody wants to go along that journey, we'll split the outcome. And if they do not, that's okay. I have it in my war chest of ways that things could be better. And just the way that this perfectionist mind, and obviously driven by that number 3 to succeed and achieve, I always want to create that. The old me used to go create companies when I found a way to do it much, much better. That's why there's been so many in my past. The new me is I'll partner with somebody on the planet. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there on the planet that are running on a hamster wheel, and they would love to do it differently. They'd much rather have the same effort in and a lot bigger outcome. And I'm okay to split it with them. So it's a great question, first and foremost. Embracing it is what I decided to do. And then combining it personally with, I have to be okay with 80%. You can't do everything yourself. But whenever you see the 80% outcome, you might politely share what you see as a much better outcome and let them do it twice. They can do it very quickly.
Love it.
So I want to also just jump in here a little bit personally, if I could. Just a couple of things. I'm always curious about these things. So if they're too personal,
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated by the start of our conversation today. You talked about calculating how much your dad made and being able to break it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious. It's fascinating that a competition mindset with your dad is what you said, almost like like created a collaboration mindset.
Yeah, it's a competition with, we were all in grade school, right? And you're trying to, this is what humans do. When they meet each other, they side each other up. And certainly in grade school, I remember that. So that probably, somebody said, my dad makes more than yours. I'm like, well, you know what? I actually don't know. So then it sent me down a road to figure this out. And then the succeed and achieve in me is, of course, whatever he's doing, whatever anybody else is doing.
Sure.
I have to be better. And it wasn't as much the succeed and achieve, which I would argue that was a high contributor. In my strength finders, achiever is first, competition second, futuristic third, focus, and then analytical. And the last one, number 6, is strategic. So when you combine all that together,
Yeah,
I really struggled with, and now I research profile studies because I feel like each one of them give you a little bit of a dimensional vision of the individual. So all around, and the more you do, the better truly understanding you have of who you are. And you can't see anybody else until you see yourself. So I really, really struggled this competition as my second highest strength finders. And it was never with anybody else. It's always with me. So the better is infinite, as I told you I wrote. The perfectionist that we picked up on from the 3-1 print, every bit of it is just all interlocking together to create exactly who I am and what I do today. But I've been training that brain for a long time. Therefore, to look at any business model anywhere on the planet, I don't see the name on the door or the title in someone's signature. My nature and my training of the brain for so long is just digging deep to understand what that individual's unique value contribution is, and also that organization's, which is unlocking for the power and benefit of collaboration. Yeah, but that's it.
Thanks. And thanks for the clarification. What I noticed too, and I just, it's an infinite game, right? The game you're playing is infinite, which
Absolutely.
is really cool, really fascinating. I think a lot of entrepreneurs would be juiced by the idea of just like what you said. If you were to, if you were to share any wisdom, are there any signals or signs where maybe you should not be adding a 0 in an area of life? Like, is there are signs, like personally? I'm not talking about the business or anything else, but like when is enough when it, like, I'm just curious, any wisdom to share there?
So it's interesting. It's first and foremost a wonderful question. I'll do my best to answer it. And I've touched on it just a little bit. The adding the zero superficially, we talked about it, to the revenue, to the profit, the sales team, and all that does make a lot of sense. But the added a zero to you personally, I feel like, and Ryan, if we had more time today, we would unpack this a little bit more. You mentioned I had so many more years. I guess I started earlier from your perception. And I'll tell you, working with entrepreneurs, and it's all over the world, what I find, that reference I made to 8 is actually true more oftentimes than not. That when you really get down to the nitty gritty of your unique value contribution, your unique ability applied, that you began to figure out how to create value before you were 10 years old. That's a place where I'll continuously, you mentioned the infinite game, and I definitely play an infinite game. There is no destination. There's only a journey. I just want to speed up the journey and have a lot of fun with the journey along the way and impact a lot more people with the ways to think about the world just a little bit differently. So focusing on that one thing that is you and your internal wirings, like your DNA, that I would always continuously find ways to add a zero to. And the rest of the stuff, the more material things, no, I'd actually shy away from them. What you will find is all that other stuff that you seek will actually be attracted to you when you begin to focus on exactly what it is, the way that you create value in the world. And ultimately, I call unique value contribution. That's a really good question, though. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. And Chad, you've already, I think, teased the second episode of our budding podcast series here that we would love to do. This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Yes,
I really appreciated the opportunity to learn about the mindset you brought with just add a zero and how it changes how you think about value creation. I thought the example you gave of the sales meeting where you go from 10 to 1 salespeople, and that would be impossible unless was a great example of the two directions you can apply that thinking. I love the line, the obstacle is the way and collaboration is the way through it. I think that's a great mindset shift about how to look at obstacles and, again, how to change your relationship with them. And then some things that stood out to me about collaboration. It's the unique value created by a combination of 2 people, places, or things. Don't forget to name the baby you created. Great collaborations need to serve the same hero target. And you touched on this several times. Split the outcome, and as quick as practicable and makes sense, make sure you're splitting, doing that ACH payment, not, leaving your partner looking for the reconciliation at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. So much value here in such a short period of time. Chad, thank you again so much for joining us. And if folks want to learn more about you, what should they do? Where should they follow you? What website should they go to? What should they do next?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's very easy to find, and also SeedSpark.com. And
awesome. So find Chad Jenkins on LinkedIn and SeedSpark.com. And Chad, again, thank you for joining us today on The Next Level.
Thanks, Chad.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Great to see you both.
Likewise.